Ethan Rivers woke up that Tuesday morning feeling like his chest was being crushed from the inside out, breathing heavily. He had ignored the pain for weeks, now telling himself it was just stress from work or maybe he was getting old at 34, but Claire, his wife of 7 years, kept insisting he see someone about it. The hospital walls were too white, too clean, and the smell of antiseptic made his stomach turn as he sat across from Dr. Harrison, who shuffled papers with a face that had clearly delivered bad news before, clearing throat. The doctor's mouth moved, forming words that seemed to travel through water before reaching Ethan's ears. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer. Ethan felt his hands go numb and the room started spinning like someone had pulled the floor out from beneath him. Gasping, he tried to speak but nothing came out, just a strange choking sound that made the doctor reach for a box of tissues he would not need because the tears had not come yet, only the shock. "How long do I have?" Dr. Harrison leaned back, measuring his words carefully like he was weighing gold. 6 months, maybe a year if treatment goes well, but we need to start aggressive chemotherapy immediately. Ethan drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned bone white, heart pounding. The world outside looked different now, like someone had turned down the brightness on everything, the trees, the sky, even the sun seemed dimmer, somehow less real. He thought about Claire waiting for him at home, probably making dinner like she did every Tuesday, her dark hair pulled back in that messy way he loved, sighing. How was he supposed to tell her that their future together, the one they had planned with kids and growing old and traveling to Italy, was being cut short? When he walked through the door, Claire turned from the stove with that smile that had made him fall in love with her back in college, smiling warmly, but the smile faded the moment she saw his face. "What did they say?" Ethan opened his mouth and finally the words came out broken and raw. "I have cancer, Claire." She dropped the wooden spoon and it clattered against the tile floor, gasping sharply. Her hand flew to her mouth and tears immediately filled her eyes as she rushed to him, wrapping her arms around his chest, crying softly. "No, no, no, this cannot be happening." They stood there in the kitchen holding each other while the pasta boiled over on the stove, filling the room with steam, neither of them noticing or caring, because in that moment their whole world had just shattered into a million pieces. The first month after the diagnosis felt like living in a nightmare that refused to end. Exhaling shakily, Ethan started chemotherapy the following week, and the treatments hit him harder than Dr. Harrison had warned, turning his once strong body into something fragile and hollow. Claire drove him to every appointment, sitting beside him in those sterile waiting rooms, holding his hand while other patients coughed and whispered around them, squeezing hand. She would smile at him with encouragement, but Ethan noticed something changing in her eyes, a kind of distance that had not been there before, like she was looking at him but seeing something else entirely. The hair loss came next, in clumps on his pillow, in the shower drain between his fingers when he ran them through what was left, voice cracking. Claire said it did not matter that he was still handsome, but he caught her staring sometimes when she thought he was asleep, and the look on her face was not love, it was something closer to fear or maybe pity. He tried to stay positive, cracking jokes about looking like a movie action hero without hair, laughing weakly. But the jokes fell flat in the heaviness that had settled over their home like fog that would not lift no matter how hard either of them tried. Claire started staying late at work 3 nights a week, then 4, sighing heavily. She said her boss needed extra help on a big project and they needed the money now more than ever, with all the medical bills piling up, and Ethan wanted to believe her because believing her was easier than facing what his gut was telling him. One evening when she came home past midnight, Ethan was sitting in the dark living room, unable to sleep from the nausea, breathing shallowly. Her hair was messy and her lipstick was smudged at the corner, and when he asked where she had been she barely looked at him. "I told you, the Henderson project, we ordered dinner at the office." But her voice sounded hollow, rehearsed, like she had practiced the answer on the drive home, voice trembling. Ethan felt something crack inside his chest that had nothing to do with the cancer eating away at his pancreas. "Who is Mark?" Claire froze halfway to the bedroom, her back still turned to him, sharp inhale. "What are you talking about?" "Your phone lit up while you were in the shower yesterday." Pause. "Good night, beautiful, cannot wait to see you tomorrow." The silence that followed was deafening, louder than any scream. Tense silence. Claire turned slowly and her face had gone pale, her eyes wide like a deer caught in headlights, trying to decide whether to run or fight. "Ethan, that is just a co-worker. You are reading too much into things." Stuttering. "You are stressed and the medication is making you paranoid." But he could see the lie written across every feature, the way she would not meet his eyes, the way her hands shook slightly as she crossed her arms defensively. The next 2 weeks were torture, worse than any chemotherapy session Ethan had endured, groaning in pain. He wanted to confront her, wanted to demand the truth, but part of him was terrified of what that truth might be, so he stayed quiet and watched. Claire became more careful with her phone, keeping it face down, deleting messages, taking calls in the other room, whispering. But Ethan was not stupid. He had spent 7 years learning every detail of her face, every tell, every nervous habit, and he knew when she was lying. His body was failing rapidly now, the cancer spreading faster than the doctors had predicted. Coughing violently, he had lost 30 pounds and could barely keep food down, and some mornings he woke up wondering if this would be the day his body finally gave up completely. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the agony of watching his wife slip away from him emotionally, crying silently. She still said "I love you," still kissed him goodbye in the mornings, but it all felt mechanical, like she was going through motions out of obligation rather than genuine feeling. One afternoon while Claire was at work again, Ethan found himself going through her laptop, something he had never done in their entire marriage. Hands shaking. He felt disgusted with himself, but the need to know was consuming him from the inside out, stronger than the cancer itself. The emails were all there, dozens of them, between Claire and Mark Stevens, a senior partner at her firm. Scrolling frantically, they started innocent enough work discussions, lunch meetings, but then they shifted into something else entirely. "I cannot stop thinking about you. Last night was incredible. We cannot let Ethan find out. He does not have long anyway, and I cannot keep pretending everything is okay." Ethan slammed the laptop shut and vomited into the trash can beside the desk, retching. Not from the chemo this time, but from the pure soul-crushing betrayal of reading those words written by the woman he had pledged his life to. She was sleeping with another man while he was dying, sobbing uncontrollably. When Claire came home that evening, Ethan was sitting at the kitchen table, the laptop open in front of him, displaying the emails in brutal clarity, stone-faced. She walked in smiling, carrying takeout Chinese food, his favorite, but the smile died when she saw what was on the screen. Her face went through a dozen emotions in seconds: shock, fear, guilt, anger, and finally something that looked almost like relief. Breathing rapidly. "Ethan, I can explain." He stood up slowly, his weakened body shaking with rage and grief, voice rising. "Explain what, Claire? That while I am literally dying you have been finding comfort in another man's bed, shouting. That you cannot even wait until I am gone before replacing me." She started crying, her makeup running down her cheeks in black streaks, crying hysterically. "You do not understand how hard this has been, watching you fade away every single day, knowing I am going to lose you." Voice breaking. "Mark was just there and I was weak and scared and I made a mistake." "A mistake?" Laughing bitterly. "Reading those emails, it sounds like you have been making that mistake for months now." Claire collapsed into a chair, her whole body shaking as tears streamed down her face, sobbing. She tried to reach for Ethan's hand, but he pulled away like her touch would burn him, and maybe it would, because everything inside him felt like it was on fire. "I never meant for this to happen." Gasping between sobs. "When they told us you had cancer, I felt like my world ended too, and I did not know how to handle it, so I just kept going to work, kept pretending everything was normal." Ethan leaned against the counter for support, his legs barely holding him up anymore, breathing heavily. The betrayal hurt worse than any pain the cancer had caused, worse than the needle sticks and the nausea and the feeling of his own body turning against him. "So your solution was to sleep with your co-worker," voice cold. "While I was going through chemo, while I was fighting to stay alive for you, for us, you were in his bed." Claire shook her head desperately, her hands covering her face, muffled crying. "It was not like that at first. He just listened when I needed someone to talk to, and then one night after a really hard day when you almost died in the hospital, I broke down and he was there." Ethan felt something inside him give way completely, voice breaking. The part of him that had been fighting to survive, to beat the odds, to maybe see one more Christmas with Claire, just died right there in that kitchen, standing 3 feet away from the woman he loved. "You know what the worst part is?" Laughing bitterly. "I thought the cancer would be what killed me, but you did that already, Claire." My heart stopped beating the moment I read those messages. He walked past her toward the bedroom, moving slowly like an old man, though he was only 34, footsteps heavy. Behind him he could hear her crying harder now, calling his name, but he did not turn around, could not turn around, because if he looked at her face he might forgive her, and he could not do that. The next morning Ethan called his brother David, who lived 2 states away, phone ringing. When David answered, his voice was cheerful until he heard the flatness in Ethan's tone. "I need you to come get me." Within 6 hours David was there, loading Ethan's few belongings into his truck, while Claire watched from the doorway, sniffling. She had cried all night, her eyes red and swollen, and she kept saying she was sorry over and over, like the words could somehow undo the damage. "Ethan, please do not leave, we can work through this." Pleading. "I will end things with Mark, I will do whatever it takes." But Ethan just looked at her with eyes that held no anger anymore, only emptiness, hollow voice. "You already killed me, Claire. The cancer is just finishing what you started." Ethan spent his final weeks at David's house in a small room overlooking a lake, water lapping. His brother took care of him without judgment, bringing him meals he could barely eat, sitting with him during the bad nights when the pain became unbearable and death felt like a mercy. Claire called every day, left voicemails that Ethan never listened to, sent flowers that David threw away before Ethan could see them. Phone buzzing. She even showed up once, but David turned her away at the door, telling her she had done enough damage. Ethan's body deteriorated rapidly without the will to fight anymore. Labored breathing. Dr. Harrison said it was common for patients to decline faster when they lost hope, when they had nothing left to live for, and Ethan had lost everything that mattered. 3 weeks after leaving Claire, Ethan woke up knowing this was his last day, weakly opening eyes. The pain had finally subsided, replaced by a strange peaceful numbness that spread through his limbs like warm water. David sat beside the bed holding his brother's hand, crying quietly. "I'm sorry this happened to you, man, you deserved so much better." Ethan managed a weak smile, whispering, "I loved her, David, that is the crazy part. Even after everything I still love her, but love is not always enough, is it?" As the sun set through the window, painting the room in shades of orange and gold, Ethan closed his eyes for the last time, breathing slowing. His last thought was not of betrayal or pain, but of the girl he had met in college with messy dark hair and a smile that had once promised forever. He died at 7:43 that evening with his brother beside him, while 2 states away Claire sat alone in their empty house, finally understanding that some betrayals cannot be forgiven and some wounds cut deeper than any disease ever could. Silence. What we learn from this story. This tragic tale teaches us that betrayal during someone's most vulnerable moments leaves scars that outlast life itself. Claire's selfishness came from an inability to cope with grief, but seeking comfort in infidelity rather than communication destroyed the one person who needed her most. We learn that when facing hardship, the easy escape often causes more damage than facing pain honestly together. Ethan's mistake was perhaps loving too deeply without protecting his own dignity, but Claire's weakness showed that fear and inability to process difficult emotions can lead us to hurt those we claim to love most. The story reminds us that our actions during someone's darkest hours define our character forever, and that some choices, no matter how human or understandable, carry consequences that cannot be undone even with infinite apologies.